Hello, and thank you for tuning in. I'm James Cleveland.
And I'm Allie Havens. In local news tonight, the city of Winchester is having to jump through onerous and lengthy hoops just to build a sidewalk.
The city received a federal transportation enhancement grant for an 80% of a $317,000 sidewalk on Main Street. City officials were excited about the grant.
Then came the 494-page manual that all grantees must comply with for the grant money.
2.5 years later, the town is still jumping through a series of federally mandated hoops so it can start the design phase of the project.
Well, I guess there's always a price of accepting government money, even if you are a local government.
Yeah, and one thing too, even if you are a private business, and let's say you want to expand your building, it's very difficult to go through all the whole permitting process. So I can't even imagine dealing with the federal government. It's probably even a lot worse.
Well, it shouldn't take 2.5 years just to decide that you can probably start the design of the sidewalk. That's a little too much, I would say.
Yeah, I've actually worked doing concrete work before, and it's like the most simple thing you can do. It's not rocket science. So taking that long to they haven't even started on the project, that's ridiculous.
How long should it take to do a sidewalk? Or about a block?
Probably maybe like a week at the most. And it shouldn't even take that long if you have a competent crew.
Right. Well, $317,000 is a lot to get, and I could see why they'd be excited about it. I wonder if they anticipated having to go through all these hoops.
Yeah, it must be a massive sidewalk too, because I used to build these huge water tanks, and like a 1-million-gallon tank would be like $300,000. So I can't even imagine having a sidewalk cost that much.
Well, it is the government. In state news tonight, Service of New Hampshire is predicting it will ask the Public Utilities Commission to increase what are already the state's highest energy service rates.
PSNH is forecasting an energy service rate of 8.9 cents per kilowatt hour compared with the current charge of 7.11 cents per kilowatt hour.
The proposed energy service rate essentially reflects the anticipated market price for energy among regional providers, plus the costs associated with government mandates.
Yeah, I did the math real quick, and this basically represents a 14% increase, and it's likely that it'll need to go up in a couple of years again. So, it's, I guess, never ending when you have a government monopoly as the only provider in town.
Right. I'm hoping that it would be nice if there weren't so many regulations involved with energy service providers. Like, I don't see why the only service provider providing energy for my household has to be in New Hampshire, that there might be a provider in another state that could do it cheaper. And I'm also excited to hopefully see improvements in energy production, because a lot of people are forecasting the future will have free energy, and that would just be amazing. I mean, imagine how that would cut back on homelessness and people being able to spend money on other things besides oil and electricity, because that makes up a huge expense in a lot of houses, especially in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and some people, maybe they'll say like, well, the power is a natural monopoly. Like, we need to have the government run that because it's a monopoly. But let's take like cable television. I don't see that going up 14%, and that's arguably a natural monopoly because they're the only game in town.
What would a natural monopoly mean? What does that even
Well, it's kind of like the barriers to entry are so high that you cannot start a business competing with them. So like if you wanted to start your own cable television, you'd have to run the whole cables. It'd be very difficult.
I see. They're saying that's natural monopoly just because setting it all up is cheaper, just to have everyone on the same provider.
Yeah, exactly. But as technology, like what you're saying, as technology progresses, it usually abolishes these monopolies. Like, there used to be a monopoly in telephone service,
right?
But then cell phones came out, and now everyone has a cell phone, and it's rare to have a landline now.
Right. Just everyone using the same energy and it being set up that way, that is the reason for that is because of monopolies around it. That would be the easiest way for a monopoly to go about providing a service. But if you didn't have a monopoly on that service, then who knows how people would be getting their energy.
Yeah, and when you build a new house, you have to, let's say, do electrical to code. There's no other option. Like, let's say you wanted to run on solar or you wanted to run on natural gas or something. That's not even an option.
Right. Imagine if people just had. I know the generators are generally inefficient, but imagine if you didn't have monopoly on energy service providers, then being in state, then people might use something like a generator and just, people use oil tanks. They don't have to always get their oil from the same place. They wouldn't have to get their energy from the same place. And there'd be competition involved in that. And you wouldn't, consumers don't like to see rising prices for the same product.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you could have a neighborhood power plant. There's nothing, we don't even know it would exist without the current monopoly.
That's true. In regional news, a Massachusetts lab tech, Annie Duncan, was arrested and accused of faking thousands of tests that may have put innocent people behind bars.
Police said the former state crime chemist admitted that she altered or faked test results of drug cases assigned to her. Prosecutors said she went as far as adding cocaine to samples that were negative.
Officials said during her 9 years in the lab, Duncan tested more than 60,000 drug samples. About 11,000 people now in jail were put there in part due to her work. Already more than a dozen have been released because of questions about how she handled evidence.
The state crime lab was shut down last month. Special courts are now being set up to handle the thousands of cases that are expected to be reopened. As for Duncan, if she's convicted of the obstruction of justice and lying under oath, she could face more than 20 years in prison.
Well, I guess these labs aren't the most reliable sources to test, we're not unclear if it's urine samples or if it's just drugs that have been confiscated by the police and tested, but that is pretty terrible that 11,000 people were put behind bars for her work, and I wonder how she feels about that, if she feels any sense of guilt around that.
Yeah, I remember, I think the Supreme Court ruled that a prosecutor who had faked evidence was not responsible. I'm not exactly clear on the details, but it's surprising that she was even held accountable, really. Another thing, too, I'm going to count it, where were the segregation of duties? Why wasn't anyone else checking her work? Why didn't they audit, a few samples to make sure she was actually doing what she was supposed to do? There appears to be no checks on this system. If there's only one person testing the samples and then testifying, there's no check.
Right. Well, I'm curious to know if there's some kind of incentive structure, getting these lab techs to find positive results if they are incentivized to do this, because I don't understand why someone would fake something like that unless they saw it in their self-interest to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, unless she's a sociopath and she doesn't care about other people at all,
right.
Why would she do this?
But to go to the extreme to put drugs in someone's, instead of just saying, well, yeah, I found that it was positive, she actually put drugs in people's samples. So it seems like there must be some reason for that. Otherwise, why would she do it unless she just likes to see everyone, go to jail who are innocent?
Yeah, that's a great point. I have no idea why anyone would do that.
Next, we have a video of a woman who was sentenced to 12 years in prison.
How do you tell your kids goodbye? I mean, that morning I woke up, I didn't kiss or hug no one. I didn't hug my mom, my kids, or anybody. They were still asleep. I knew I was coming home. I mean, I didn't kiss my husband, nothing. My daughter just started talking, I'm not even there. They're fixing to have their first Christmas without me, For sure is, it's everywhere. The drugs are everywhere. And so, like I said, it was easy money, Everybody gets a vacation, everybody gets a break. I still get Christmas. Nobody knows what's going on,
Patricia Spotted Crow received a 12-year prison sentence for selling $31 of marijuana to a police informant. Her children were in the house during the transaction, which makes the penalty more severe. But given the circumstances, many would consider Spotted Crow's sentence harsh.
On the far side, there's a building over here. It's called Building 8. It's an administration building for our staff offices only.
Me and my mom have no criminal record. We have nothing. Never have. No, none whatsoever. So we were under the impression, I mean, it's only 3 grams of weed, you know, that's not even a blunt, that we would get probation, a slap on the wrist, get to go home, you know. Maybe have to do weekends or something in the county, not 12 years in prison.
We have very tough drug laws, even compared to a state like Texas. We have a lot of mandatory minimums, a lot of enhancements, and unlike many other states who have taken a deep look at those statutes and enhancement statutes, last year we continued to add on to them.
You know, and children of incarcerated parents have a multifold risk of becoming incarcerated themselves, and that really is demonstrated through the fact that our population, 30% of the women have one or both parents incarcerated. And so if we want to stop the cycle, we have to intervene, and we have to intervene with not only the women, but the women and their children.
It's hard. I got these 3 kids. Kobe's the 9-year-old. He goes to school. He helps me. Go in the other room now. Go in the other room now. Kobe, get her.
Case in point.
Yeah. They're tired. It's hard because they don't understand. Them little girls do not understand why their mom's gone and how long she's going to be gone. It's been a chore to sit down and explain to them that she's gone. We have to do this, we have to do that in order to keep going.
Jazz! Hi, Mommy.
So the day I signed for my time, I mean, they told me right there, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. That was not what I was expecting. And there was no goodbyes, there was no nothing, so.
You know, they're missing a lot, you know, without their mother. The baby had a real hard time. We've spent nights crying, and I've broke down, I've cried with her. She goes to the bedroom door, she knocks on the doors, and Mama, Mama. And we cry. It wasn't like they pulled a bunch of drugs out of here, you know, and we were just, they called it a mother-daughter operation. It was blown way out of proportion.
This woman was involving not only her mother, but her children in her criminal enterprise. And that spoke loudly to me. We're 3 generations involved in this, and I felt like that was the appropriate sentence. She needed to learn that there were consequences to this lifestyle she'd chosen. And from her attitude and everything that I saw, that was the appropriate sentence, and I'm totally satisfied with it.
Spotted Crow was busted where her mother lives in Kingfisher County. Kingfisher is part of District 4. Both District 4 and District 6 have the highest average prison terms in the state, 7.2 years. Oklahoma and Tulsa counties, with much more crime and also more resources, had averages of 5.5 and 4.5 years. So it's possible that Spotted Crow might not have gotten any prison time if she would have been caught in a larger county.
I've had cases where I've been told there's no other judge in the whole state who would rule this way. And I would say, well, you're looking at the first one. When you live in a county that is a small rural community, you have less options than you would in a metropolitan county. There are some who there is no answer but incarceration. And those are the ones who get sentenced. There are some that there is a chance that they will rehabilitate. You have to do what's right when you're sitting on that bench for what you see and what you have, and that's what he did.
I mean, this is not what I expected my life to be. I'm just trying to do my time and go home to my kids. I don't need extra time. I don't need misconducts or anything like that.
I want to have a big party for her. That's what I want to do. And we're just going to spend time together.
I mean, this was a real eye-opener, you know. Everything that I've worked for is gone, and I mean, I just have my kids when I get out, and that's why I'm not coming back. You know, I'm losing precious time with my babies that I'll never get back. No one can ever replace this time away from them.
Wow, that is so wrong.
Yeah, that's one, I guess, big problem with our court system. I mean, the district judge said it. We need to teach her a lesson. So our whole system is based on punishment rather than like restitution. Who did she harm? She didn't hurt anyone, and she's going to spend 12 years in jail. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And, you know, you could sort of tell by the judge's demeanor that she is a busybody, and she didn't like the girl's attitude and thought that incarceration was the only answer. And what that said to me was, I don't like people like this, and I could go 12 years without ever having to see her again. So it's a really heartless approach to justice, if you would call it that. So yeah, I mean, you know, to have no mercy for her children who have to live without their parents anymore. I mean, what should happen to this judge? What should be her punishment for causing all this harm in this family's life?
Yeah, and it's really she was claiming, the judge was, that the children were involved in the drug enterprise. I don't really see how, but it's lucky that the family had the grandma to step up, or those children would be in foster homes. Mm-hmm. And that'd be even worse. It's true, and that's what happens in a lot of cases. They go to foster homes, and there they're not treated very well either. So, you know, good job, Grandma, I guess. Today marked the second annual Chalk the Police Day. Now we have a special guest, Garret Ean from freeconcord.org, to talk about today's event. Welcome, Garret.
Hey, good to be here.
So, what is Chalk the Police Day?
Chalk the Police Day is an event which started last year. October 1st of 2011 marked the first Chalk the Police Day. And I believe what kicked it into action was the fact that the Chalking 8 incident had just occurred in Manchester a few weeks earlier. On June 4th, 2011, myself and 8 other people were either arrested or given citations for either chalking or not following the orders of the police to move away from the chalkings fast enough. So today, being the second Chalk the Police Day, I was here in Keene this year, and when I got out there at about 2:30, I noticed there was already a nice crowd of activists out there chalking Central Square, which seemed to be the primary location. And at one point, there was a man who called out to the people who were chalking from the street that they had to stop what they were doing, and I assumed it was just an annoyed passerby, and myself and other people invited him over to chalk with us. What ended up happening, I didn't see this happen. He parked in traffic, blocking a lane in Central Square, which is a big rotary. So he's blocking a lane in a rotary, which is quite dangerous. And he got out of his car, began talking to other chalkers. When I grabbed my camera and began approaching him, I noticed he was wearing some sort of identification badge. And I heard him say something about asking people to stop chalking, as though he had some authority to do so. When I went to film his badge, he raised his hand and pushed it away. And I guess as he was doing that,
Your camera?
Yes,
wow.
Pushed my camera away. So he basically assaulted me. I believe he also hit someone standing next to me as that happened with his arm. And we asked him, like, who are you, like, what authority do you have to do this? And after some conversation, we learned that he was the parks manager for the city of Keene, and he was claiming his authority as a city bureaucrat to get us to stop chalking, which nobody, of course, obeyed that order.
That is just ridiculous. Speaking of bureaucrats who were there, we have a video of the event showing Officer Bowers chalking in Central Square.
Love it.
That's so cool. Thank you.
All right, guys, have fun.
Thanks. Great.
Big
Thanks
points.
so much.
Thanks,
Have
Peter.
a great day.
Appreciate it. No other cop blockers are going to have that video.
Wasn't that nice?
Yeah, that was great on the part of that officer.
So the Keene police didn't seem to be too upset about the chalking?
No, it seemed like, I don't know in particular who he called, but he made a phone call while the bureaucrat was there, and presumably it was to the police. 2 officers did respond a few minutes later, and they didn't seem bothered by anybody. They walked through the square, said hi, and walked along. And then I guess after they had passed through the square is when they met up with the others who had gotten the video of the officer chalking the sidewalk.
I see. So does the officer chalking, does that, obviously after that they can't make any arrests because you would have this evidence of a police doing the exact same thing. So it's kind of nice to see the police actually participating in the activism.
Mm. It was a very actionable expression of the fact that chalking is legal, and that even the Keene police think chalking is legal, even if some of the suits in Keene do not.
So what about the arrests in Manchester? Why are activists in Manchester getting arrested for something the Keene police themselves will do?
I believe it stems from where the chalk is limited to. In Manchester, what happened was there were 2 activists who put chalk on the building of Manchester Police Department. Now, granted, in Manchester, the protest was over specific actions that had just happened where officers had been cleared of beating and, in another instance, killing a man inside his home during a raid. So there was a very specific reason for that protest. So even though the people had chalked the building in particular, they began coming after everybody that was there. I was arrested not for chalking, but for refusing to move from the chalked area fast enough.
Right, and they were calling it vandalism.
Yes, they were calling it, they tried to say it was both breaking a city ordinance against graffiti and also a violation of the criminal mischief statute in the state of New Hampshire, which says that you can't alter something that you don't have permission to or you don't have authorization to be altering in some way.
Ah.
And you've already been to court about that, is that correct?
Well, what I went to court for was disorderly conduct, 2 charges of refusing to move. What the officer said on the stand in my case was, though, that he had arrested me for violating what was in fact a city ordinance regarding moving when there's a group of 3 on the sidewalk. He claimed I was with a group. But what ended up was that was not relevant to the law that they had charged me under, which was disorderly conduct, which only allows the officer to enforce the New Hampshire state laws, not city ordinances, not graffiti ordinances, not moving ordinances, things like that.
Yeah, that group of 3 law, that sounds totally illegal to me, because I have the right to assemble, don't I? I mean, that's one of the provisions of the First Amendment. I guess you don't have that right.
So if I may ask, what were some of the messages being written today during Chalk the Police?
Well, Chalk the Police Day focuses primarily on both abuses by the police and also systemic problems caused by the police's actions, such as the drug war. So there were some drug war focused messages, there were some general self-ownership messages, liberty messages, calling back Cop Block's motto, badges don't grant extra rights. I believe that was chalked in a few places today.
So is this meant to be just like a freedom of speech type event, or is it directly to be messaged at the police officers to try to promote change?
Well, I guess since it's a general outreach to the police, but also the general public, the idea being it's in a very public place for a lot of people to see. I'd like to think that the police think about the messages that are out there. It seemed today that the police were already where they needed to be on the message of chalk being legal, and it was city officials who didn't understand the rights of the people.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that any efforts to, like we saw in Manchester, to end chalking, public property, do you consider that to be censorship?
Since the Manchester arrests in June, there have been a few events where there have been public chalking, and unfortunately, unlike Keene, Manchester police haven't gone so far as to participate, but they haven't made any chalking arrests, with the exception of one arrest for chalking on the Manchester courthouse.
Interesting. Well, it's very important to keep freedom of speech alive.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It's our last thing we might have.
Mm-hmm.
September 30th through October 6th, 2012 is Banned Books Week, speaking of censorship. It is the national book community's annual celebration of the freedom to read. Hundreds of libraries and bookstores around the country draw attention to the problem of censorship by mounting displays of challenged books and hosting a variety of events.
Here are some of the books that have been banned in the United States. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, The Catcher in the Rye, Gone with the Wind, and To Kill a Mockingbird.
For more information, you can go to bannedbooksweek.org. So those were some of my favorite books to read in school. Those were like assigned reading. It's interesting that they used to be banned.
Oh, no, they're currently banned. I think they're currently banned. Is that not correct?
No, I don't think that they're banned anymore. They were attempted to ban. Yeah.
I thought some schools had banned, let's say, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn because there is some language that some people don't consider appropriate. So.
Mm-hmm. Definitely in some places they're not allowed to read books that have any kind of profanity, or if they go against people's religious beliefs or however they're interpreted, they're not allowed. But yeah, I think that it's good to recognize, I'm tempted to read all of the books on this list just because if someone wants them banned, then I'm curious to know what it is that's so harmful about them.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to actually live in a society where you can't even write a book about something? That it's a total, I guess, criminality to say, oh, well, you can't have an opinion about something. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I don't know who would want to ban these books, and it's total tyranny of the majority. Oh, well, most people don't like your writing, so we're going to ban it.
Right, it's thought crime, and it just shows that ideas in a lot of ways are scarier to governments and authority figures than actual weapons or real intent to harm or whatever it is. That ideas are a lot of times the scariest thing for them, that they'd like to ban ideas.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you for coming on, Garrett.
Join us again next week for another installment of ShireTV. For more news and analysis, I'm James Cleveland.
And I'm Allie Havens. May you each find happiness, peace, and prosperity.